What's up, YouTube? Silksong's out, and it's incredible. There's a lot of different reasons I love the game, but one of them is that it is such a beautiful Metroidvania, so I wanted to spend some time discussing the various zones of the game, and since people love tier lists, I figured I'd go ahead and make a tier list out of it. But as always, tier lists mean nothing without context. The most important thing here is that I'm not counting bosses as a part of a zone. I've talked about them separately, and there are plenty of great bosses in meh zones and vice versa that make it incredibly hard to average out the boss with the zone and rank it as a whole. Today, we're going to be talking about the zones insofar as the platforming, the basic enemy design, the soundtrack and art design, all that jazz. We will be including enemy gauntlets and boss runbacks, just to be clear. Another notable aspect of level design that I'll be discussing is how much these zones really benefit from being in a Metroidvania. How much is there to link together and explore and rediscover with new movement tech? These are also my first impressions after my first 100% playthrough. Unlike my crest and boss tier list though, I really don't know that I'll need to revisit this one. I'd be kinda surprised to see this change too much on future playthroughs. And one last bit of context, we are breaking up the map into its constituent pieces. We're not gonna count this Citadel as one zone, and we will include Wisp Thicket, which is treated as though it's just an extension of Grey Moor, despite having its own name, a map color, and totally unique design. If Hive Nest Atla is a zone, then definitely Wisp Thicket is as well. We're gonna be going from worst to best, and that means we're starting with D tier. These are the zones that I straight up don't want to go to. The Shit King crown goes to, drumroll please, Bilewater, and it's not even close. What good faith argument can I even make for a different zone, for any other zone? For Christ's sake, the boss of the zone drops a bench, which admittedly is more than most bosses, but it really goes to show the design philosophy that was at work when Satan was in hell designing this zone. The fact that the zone is filled with infinitely spawning 2-damage bombs is one of the upsides here. In Bilewater, we call that a bench with extra steps. Those giant flying dudes with the infinite range 2-damage attacks, that's also a bench with extra steps. If you like Bilewater, then I would strongly encourage you to look up the symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome. We've got infinitely spawning snipers, not that you're reliably catching them to kill them anyway. We've got infinitely spawning 2-damage fish. Oh, they almost always throw you into the muck maggots as well. By the way, we got muck maggots just everywhere all over the shop. You get hit, muck maggots. You fail a platforming segment, muck maggots. You sit on a bench, believe it or not, straight to muck maggots. This place is a bona fide bad time that actively discouraged and punished exploration. Not that it isn't filled to bursting with secrets to make you feel like a jackass for learning the lesson of, oh, the spike pit filled with leeches isn't worth exploring, since the very next one has the second and last bench of the entire zone. No, I am not counting the boss benches at the ends of the zone as real benches. Get out of here, bite me. Bilewater isn't getting the generous take because it didn't give anything other than muck maggots and suffering. Honestly, we really could have called D tier Bilewater tier since it's only Bilewater and Bilewater adjacent zones down here. Sharing the D tier, we've got Putrefied Ducks. Genuinely, I find it far less offensive than Bilewater. It has 50% more benches and less than half the zone size of Bilewater, and far less sections explicitly designed to dunk a player into muck maggots. There are no infinitely respawning enemies. If somebody told me they liked Bilewater, I'd be genuinely confused. If somebody said the same about Putrefied Ducks though, I can kind of see where they might be coming from. Still though, as a corner zone you usually access after getting double jump, it gets no benefits from being a Metroidvania. There isn't really any backtracking and further exploration to do, aside from Mr. Mushroom in Act 3, I guess. The vibes are rancid, and while some of the enemy designs are pretty neat, most of them are horribly unfun to actually fight. Because the vast majority of your time spent fighting enemies will be spent fighting these flying guys that move incredibly quickly, incredibly erratically, and are incredibly hard to dodge. Primal Asp would eat your heart out, it has evolved. And someone is blowing up my phone. Thinking back on the zone, there really aren't any cool platforming segments, and to my memory, no gauntlets at all, but considering the enemies here, thank God for that, I guess. The only reason the Putrefied Ducks aren't getting the last place spot is because Bilewater shared a lot of the design ideas, but was designed with active malice instead of just as a normal level to explore like Putrefied Ducks. Having something like 8 times the bench density really helps out how unpleasant the zone can feel. Unfortunately, we're not quite out of D tier yet because Bilewater isn't quite out of neighbors. Sinner's Road also manages to make it into my D tier. I originally was going to give it a C, but then I tried to articulate all the things I liked about Sinner's Road. That was a very short list. Arguably, it wasn't a list at all since I couldn't write down anything. Now, I'll admit this is a decidedly high D tier because I don't have passion in me to rant about this place like the other two. It's just filled with muck maggots and a lot of 2-damage crocodiles and big dudes, while being devoid of any really interesting platforming or fun gauntlets. Hell, even the basic enemies aren't particularly exciting. It's not offensively bad like Bilewater, and I easily think it's more fun than Putrefied Ducks, but I'm not looking forward to Sinner's Road when I replay the game. And the fact that it's a zone that I kind of don't want to go to is what guarantees it a spot in D tier. Next up, we move on to the C tier. These zones are fine. They aren't bad at all, and I'm generally having a good time when I play them, but that's because I'm playing Silksong, not because the zone is really elevating the Silksong experience in any way. It might be surprising to have Verdania be this low. It's beautiful and I love the general vibe, but the teleporting enemies that I really hated fighting bring it crashing down to low C tier. I really can't overstate how much I did not like these enemies teleporting constantly, and they bring it crashing down to what would have been at least a very high C, maybe even a low B, almost all the way down to D tier, because it's not that big of a zone, there's not really that much going on. And my main memory of Lost Verdania is just getting trolled by the flying ranged enemies teleporting constantly. And it's not like you can just run away from them because they'll teleport with you all the way through the zone. Sometimes you'll end up with more than one on you. It's just a nightmare to deal with these enemies. Call it a skill issue, but I had a bad time here because of these dudes. Next up, the wormways were relatively unpleasant for me. I don't like zones devoid of killable enemies, and the wormways just don't have enemies to kill. They either don't die or they infinitely respawn. It also lacked any real platforming to do. The main things I enjoy in this game aren't there, and the aesthetic is, cave. Like, you can't really do less for than this did. Still, though, I didn't have an awful time or anything. It doesn't have, like, D-tier level of, I hope I don't have to go to Wormways anytime soon. I'm really not looking forward to playing in Wormways. That's not how I feel about it. Maybe that's because it's relatively short. Maybe that's because it's relatively easy, and there's just, like, not that much suffering to really get through in the Wormways. But even though I don't really like anything about the Wormways, they're not unpleasant enough for me to give them a D tier the way I did some of the previous entries on this list. Now, for some reason, it doesn't have its own map, but I'm still ranking Wisp Thicket as its own thing, not that it's gonna rank very highly in my C tier. If it weren't for the Magma Bell, it might not even make it to C tier. Since that tool does exist, though, the zone doesn't bother me. For some reason, this map is just considered a subcategory of Grey Moors, but it's kind of baffling to me because it has its own name, map color, totally unique identity. It's just that it's a very small area without much to it, and as such, there's not much to like either. If we're about to count Weave Nest, Atla, and the Cradle as unique zones, then I can't really justify excluding Wisp Thicket just because it randomly doesn't have a map. Now that said, I really can't remember the music from this area. The enemies are unique, but they aren't fun to fight. Essentially, at the end of the day, Wisp Thicket is super milquetoast and uninteresting as long as you equip the Magma Bell. And if you don't do that, it's an awful zone. So if I hadn't known about Magma Bell, maybe I'd have had a awful G tier time with this zone. I'd assume that's what happens to anyone who does rank it super low. But for me, this is just not that offensive to play through. Speaking of Weave Nest Atla, it's basically just an Easter egg side zone of Bone Bottom. And I'm only including it as its own thing because I don't want the comments to come after me for disqualifying it and lumping it into Bone Bottom. It was basically just a little side area without much to write home about them. Most of the game is the desecrated husk of some long gone thing, so the Weaver's Nest aren't really unique in that respect. There's no gauntlets, unless you count Double Moss Mother as a gauntlet instead of a boss, I guess. Almost no platforming, and not really a lot to talk about here. It's pretty and thematically neat, though, and that gets it above the real stinkers of the game. Next up, we've got Bellheart. It's a quest hub, and it has a sick boss, but I'm not ranking quests or bosses today. Neither of those really matter to me in a level design discussion. Bellheart, as an area, is the Bell Veins, and the Bell Veins sucked. I did like the design of Bellheart itself. It might only be getting to mid-C tier on the vibes of Bellheart the city, because aesthetically it's very cool, but again, no gauntlets, kind of no platforming, you more or less just fall or wall cling up. There's not a lot going on here to like, and with pretty much only, I think it's only the two enemy types, right? There's really nothing to talk about with Bellheart, but because the city is very pretty and I really like the OST, and there's that moment when you first come into its curse, there's the little Easter egg where you load a save and you haven't cleansed the curse, you're stuck in the webs too. There's enough to like about Bellheart to get it to a middling to high C tier, in spite of the fact that the Bell Veins as an area are not very good. Getting deeper into my C tier, there's only one part of the Citadel that I don't have praise for, and that's the Memoriam. A statement that's very true for the Memoriam, generally true for most of C tier, is if this zone had been something else, it wouldn't have made the game worse for me, you know, barring something bafflingly bad compared to the rest of Silksong like Bilewater. And I think it's the only part of the Citadel where if it had been removed, it wouldn't have left a hole shaped like the Memoriam. You could put anything up there, it wouldn't bother me. Thematically, the idea of a preservationist effort is cool, but there's not much to say about it from an enemy design, level layout, or Metroidvania aspect. It's just sort of a big series of rows filled with dudes. The enemies are mostly reused, the platforming is mostly basic, and there's not a lot of exploring and rediscovery going on in this zone. Now, all that said, it's fine. No complaints. This is the first time on the list we've hit that mark. Metaphorically speaking, this is plain white bread. It's fine to spread the jam of Silksong on, I'll enjoy my toast, but it's not doing anything for me, it's just a jam delivery system. The Morrows very much embody the idea of just being a Silksong delivery system. I have nothing bad to say about them, but they end up just being the tutorial zone. The Deep Docks and Bone Bottom zones steal all the Metroidvania thunder, and this zone is sort of just the easy in-between zone to introduce new players. It is just a Silksong delivery system. It's perfectly serviceable zone to let new players learn the game, but in being so accessible for new players to learn, it is devoid of anything super interesting for Hollow Knight veterans or for people replaying the game to really look forward to. Next up, we have the Slab, and I really like the idea of it, but in practice, it's a super linear prison escape with a bunch of very brief dead ends to explore, and an enemy roster that I really don't particularly like. It being this high on the list is mostly because of the kidnapping set piece being a really cool bit of Metroidvania world exploration, but the zone itself is kinda lame. I'm tempted to rank this lower, but I really like the jailbreak sequence, and there's a lot of creativity on display with the trap gauntlets. So, a lot of the zone, not that good, low C tier stuff, but the trap gauntlets and the getting sent to jail bit, that's all really cool. I do like it enough to put it relatively high in my C tier. But it is definitely more of a mixed bag than most of these previous zones. Speaking of mixed bags, I hate to say it, but the Abyss barely deserves this high of a C tier. The enemies are either super basic or super annoying, the platforming isn't that interesting for an Act 3 zone, it's thematically appropriate but massively annoying that I cannot call the Bell Beast to leave. The only reason it gets this high is because I really like the lava escape section, but it's not even the best lava escape in the game. It does a lot to cover up for the flaws in the zone, but there really isn't anything else here for me to like. This is also a zone that's a great showcase of why I'm splitting out the bosses from their respective zones. The Abyss for me is a low C zone with a high B platforming segment in the lava escape, and then a top of S tier boss with Lost Lace. Ranking this in like A tier or something when I genuinely don't like the zone itself only serves to really confuse the tier list. And last in my C tier, frankly, I don't really know where I should be putting the Cradle because it's a very mixed bag. Despite being pretty small, it is 3 totally separate zones: the Terminus, the Grandmother Silk Climb, and the Surface. I guess it's here because I love the Terminus and Ventrica system as a part of world design and lore. I appreciate the Surface as a massive secret area and its associated platforming area, even if it's a bit on the frustratingly hard side. You could argue that the Surface is its own zone, I guess. It's not got a map, and the only thing it connects to is the Cradle, so I'm giving it to the Cradle. It's a mishmash, really. 3 wholly unrelated zones. I think with DLCs in the future somehow connecting to Terminus, because it seems like it has a lot of room for new connections in the future, this could easily be like a B tier zone. But right now, it's just a bit all over the place, and there's really not enough going on to get it out of C tier. That said, the climb is a very fun run back to GMS. The Surface climb, despite being frustratingly hard your first time, is genuinely one of the core platforming segments in the game, and the Ventrica system genuinely adds a lot to the game. Thematically confused mishmash or not, there's enough to like here for me to give it my highest C tier ranking. Which brings us to B tier. These zones are good. Playing these zones generally adds to the experience for me. Even if I'm not playing Silksong for these zones specifically, this is more than a Silksong delivery system. These add to the experience in a meaningful way. My lowest B tier goes to Shellwood. It is a totally sufficient forest pond area and a great introduction to the walking ability that it's about to give you. It's frankly unexceptional, but I look back on my time there very fondly and can't bring myself to not give it at least a B tier, primarily on the strength of the movement throughout the area. It is not difficult platforming, but it is fun pogoing off the various flora and fauna. I think just being fun to move through is enough for a B tier, but the enemies and gauntlets leave me wanting a lot more than what I got. Next up, White Ward is a super difficult one for me to rate. I really like the general vibe and the enemy aesthetics. It's an incredibly dark zone. It's just also not very interesting from an exploration perspective with no platforming or gauntlets really to speak of. On thematics alone, it gets to B tier, but it is basically just thematics. And another surprisingly low ranking out of the Citadel comes from the Whispering Vaults. It is definitely one of the Citadel's weakest areas for me. It's cool thematically, but the box puzzles do nothing for me, and I'm not overly fond of any enemy in this zone. I think part of why it ranks so low is that every room just looks the same to me in this zone. While it has a lot of movement, it doesn't really have any major platforming segments or super interesting fights. Don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the zone at all. The music and aesthetics do a lot to elevate a pretty boring mix of enemies and platforming. It's still a part of the Citadel after all, so it's no surprise that I like the vibes. And I will say that, like, I get it if you like this zone a lot more than I do, because the fact that it all blurs together into one giant room filled with boxes for me definitely is not helping my understanding and enjoyment of the zone. Before I make any of these tier list videos, I generally talk to my friends about the things I'm ranking to get input from other people and see if it can give me fresh perspective. And when I asked my friend to rank the zones, he just put the entire Citadel in his S tier and renamed it to Citadel tier. Now, I don't agree with that. I'm not that Citadel build. But the Citadel is awesome, and even some of the weakest parts of it, like the Whispering Vaults, for me still rank into my B tier. Next up, we've got the Hunter's March. This area hurt me, and frankly, I think I would have enjoyed it more in my first playthrough when I mistakenly thought that forcing my way through it early would reward me with something worth having. I'd sing the praises of Carmelita's late game side area, but that's actually part of the far fields. There's not a whole lot of zone going around and not a whole lot going on in it. That said, I do quite like the ant enemies. I do like the red ball platforming, whatever they're called. But the issue was that most of the best stuff involving the ants and platforming, again, is in far fields. What's actually in Hunter's March is like one mini boss, one gauntlet, a couple of rooms with some pogoing. There's just not enough going on here, and most of what you think of as good Hunter's March, when I look back at the map, turned out to be in far fields. So the main problem ends up just being there's not a lot of Hunter's March to like, and the zone is relatively small with not a lot of incentive to go there. I enjoyed playing what's there, but I'm probably going to put it off towards the end of my playthrough, towards the end of Act 2, whenever I replay the game, because there's just really not a lot of great reasons to go there, other than playing on Silksong and wanting that mask very early. Getting into the top of B tier, the zones that really have me wanting to place them in A tier, but I can't quite justify it, let's start with Sands of Karak. It feels a lot like Blasted Steppes, but red and with less ground. I know that's unfair of me, but if we're going to rank the vibe and how the area felt to me, I can't make myself feel differently, and I felt like I was at a secondhand thrift shop with the vibes that I was getting. I can't not feel that way. The platforming is interesting and unique, but ultimately not that hard once you understand it. It's a dead end discovered via the Metroidvania gameplay loop, which is cool for the zones that connect to it, but for the Sands itself, it ends up getting next to nothing by being revisited later on. It is a victim rather than a beneficiary of the Metroidvania gameplay loop. It's decidedly pretty and has some very unique platforming, but on the whole ends up being a relatively small area with, I think, no gauntlets, relatively frustrating enemies, and a lot of repurposed aesthetics that hold it out of my A tier. I end up just being way too frustrated with the conch flies and wanting a lot more than the zone actually gave to me, and I can't justify giving it the A tier. And lastly, at the top of my B tier, I want to give Underworks the A tier so badly. It's really cool from a storytelling perspective. It's got its own enemies and identity, a lot of platforming, all good things. I enjoyed my time in the zone a lot, but what it comes down to is I don't think I was having an A tier time. I'm not sitting down planning my Silksong run thinking, oh boy, I can't wait to 100% the Underworks again. I had a really good time with it my first time through, but that's just because I love the Silksong, and after mastering the last judge and that run back, I had finally hit my stride with the gameplay system and just got into the flow of the game. Underworks is a solid zone with some great thematic elements, but it's also got a lot of random death traps that make no thematic sense to me. And while I have a good time playing it, I don't have a great time. Of all the metrics, fun is the most important one, and I just can't say I'm having as much fun in the Underworks as any zone that I'm about to rank in A tier. So let's get into A tier. Let's get into the grade zones. When I'm thinking about Silksong, and I'm not daydreaming about the boss fights, I'm usually thinking about platforming and soundtracks, and these are the zones that spring to mind, the things that really elevate the experience for me. Getting right into it, let's start with Mount Fae. It's got some really solid platforming. I mean, it's pretty much all platforming with relatively weak thematics and next to no enemies. The enemies are all various forms of platforms, basically. But damn it, I like platforming no matter how bad at it I am. I like the platforming enough that it manages to drag its otherwise weak C tier zone all the way to a low A tier, because the platforming is just good enough to keep me having a great time. There's no gauntlets, there's barely anything that is an enemy that isn't a platform. The songs aren't the best, but I had a really good time when I was in Mount Fae. And I think a huge part of what has me putting Mount Fae in my A tier is when I was late in the run doing a lot of backtracking. For most zones, I'd be like, oh man, I've got to go back to X, that's a pain in the ass. But every time I found out I missed something in Mount Fae, I was like, oh cool, let's go to Mount Fae again. It never became something where I didn't want to go to Mount Fae. I really enjoy moving to the area, I had a great time with it. It's good platforming and I like being there, that's all it comes down to. Next up, this one might be a hot take. I like Blasted Steppes, like a lot. I feel like it should be a hot take since so many people hate the last judge run back, and that is quintessential to exactly what I like about the zone. Also, it's a great run back, like it's genuinely elevating the zone. It's the first zone in the game where movement really clicked for me. There's a lot of fun movement here. While the enemies can be frustrating, they are varied and cool and wholly unique, until they get reused in Sands at least. I'd rank it higher in A tier if I didn't think the wind was so damn loud and rather irritating as a mechanic. But seriously, I don't get why people are so upset with the last judge run back. it is basically one big room and it's just like 30 seconds of pretty fun platforming. I kind of get it if they're fighting every enemy, but I think you should hold your opinion on runbacks if you think you're supposed to kill all the enemies in a runback because you clearly don't understand them. Like, you don't do that. That's not what a runback is. It's a run back. It's very straightforward. And the process of running back to the last judge is genuinely fun. It's good movement. Why do people hate this? Next up, we've got the Deep Docks. It is an incredibly solid zone. It's got a cool and unique thematic identity, unique enemies, several good gauntlets, no brutal runbacks, and benefits a lot from the Metroidvania design. Pretty much every movement upgrade lets you find something new here, and the simple key section is basically an entire second zone to further hone that identity in. That section adds a ton more lava platforming in addition to harder enemies. It generally just feels like a fantastic zone and really goes to show how good I think the A tier zones are that this isn't even that close to my S tier. I think of all the zones, maybe Deep Docks has the most benefits from being in a Metroidvania, where you constantly rediscover new things in this area, not just like new exits to new zones, but actually more things to do and find in Deep Docks. I'm trying to think of like anything I don't like about Deep Docks. Thinking back on it, I'm not remembering the music particularly at all. There are a couple of enemies that are just like the 2 damage bomb guys. Those are a little bit annoying to deal with. The criticisms for Deep Docks in my eyes are very minor. Next up, it's taken a while to get here, we have Bone Bottom, the first zone of the game, and it is an awesome hub zone with plenty of Metroidvania connections to discover. I really enjoyed it, and the questline developing and eventually losing Bone Bottom Settlement was amazing. I'm generally not ranking questlines here, but the zone is fundamentally changing as we progress the quest, so I kind of can't avoid it here. Apparently, I missed the funeral. Hell, I missed even talking to the guy that died after the first time, and I also missed that they don't actually die in Act 3. It turns out that they move over to where the fleas were in the start of Act 1, and they survive. I had no idea, but all of that is awesome. I might have put Bone Bottom at the very top of my A tier if we had counted Atla as a sub part of it, but hey, it's on the map and I can't be disqualifying things. People get rowdy about that. There's just so many connections to Bone Bottom and additional bits and edges to find as you re-explore with new movement tools. It's mostly here for the settlement questline and the Metroidvania aspects, but that's not to say the aesthetics are bad, just that they aren't even close to the best part for me. That said, the main thing holding this down is similar to the Morrows. This zone is generally very lackluster in regards to enemy and platforming engagement. It's the first zone and it is suitably basic, but that pretty much guarantees it won't be engaging enough for me to give it an S tier. Getting into the very top of my A tier, the Grain Wars are really, really pretty. The aesthetics are nice, but the music is absolutely incredible. It's got a lot of different subzones with a wide variety of enemy diversity. There's a ton to explore, a decent chunk to backtrack to and rediscover. Its music is so somber and beautiful, really just a fantastic zone all around. If it has something more, whether it be in the form of platforming, difficult enemies, or gauntlets, it would have made my S tier. I suppose the main thing keeping it from my S tier is just that the birds are unfun enemies and the balloon-based platforming is probably my least favorite type of platforming in the game. It's still a fantastic zone, it's got a lot going on and a lot to love. The far fields are an awesome zone, being really fun to move through with a decently varied set of enemies from the ant-adjacent sections to its own unique flying stuff. Sort of how Sands of Crack borrowed from Blasted Steps, the far field is borrowed from Hunter's March, but frankly it's so much bigger and has so much more ant content than the March does that it ends up feeling like the March is ripping it off instead of vice versa. It also has one of my favorite set pieces with the lava escape, and benefits a lot from the Metroidvania design with its hidden side areas and especially with the ant zone for Carmelita in the third act. It's a great zone and almost makes it into my S tier. Unfortunately, the criteria for my S tier is incredibly strict and this doesn't make the cut. So let's talk about why Farfields doesn't make it in my S tier. These are my favorite zones in the game. There's probably a graphic on the screen giving you some nerd shit explanation as to what makes an S tier zone, but fuck that, here's the real criteria. Do I love the zone? Am I thinking about this zone when I am hyped about Silksong and looking forward to replaying it? Am I going to be confused if you tell me you don't like the zone? These are my favorites by far, and the most important criteria for getting into S tier isn't quantifiable. It's fun, and fun is a buzzword. It doesn't mean anything. Fun is not a thing that you can measure. But my criteria for S tier is quite simply, am I having an absolute blast when I'm in the zone? If I'm not, then it shouldn't be an S tier. Any other criteria I give you is just an effort to quantify and give legitimacy to why I love these areas so much. And my friend was right. S tier is Citadel tier. Let's start it off with the High Halls. It sounds great, looks great, has a totally unique set of enemies that pose a real late game challenge, has a decent chunk of engaging if not all that difficult platforming, and the hardest gauntlet in the game. I love the High Halls gauntlet and I'm giving it an S tier mostly for that gauntlet. Because, and I had no idea at the time, But apparently in peak Metroidvania design, both Garamond and Chakra will help you in that gauntlet if you finish their quest lines first, which is absolutely incredible. The platforming challenges are appropriate for the late game, and the gauntlet is genuinely my favorite gauntlet in the game. Hard, sure, but totally fair, and I genuinely love that fight. In the same way that Carmelita set the bar for Act 3 so incredibly high, the high halls set the bar so high for the top areas of the Citadel that it's probably part of the reason I ranked the Memoriam so low, as I expected to be of comparable quality to the high halls, which, in my eyes at least, are one of the best zones in the entire game. Next up, we have the thematic core of Act 2, the Coral Chambers. They are stunningly beautiful, both in terms of visual and audio design. Everything is gorgeous, the soundtrack's incredible, the sound design, especially pogoing up the bells to that music, is all fantastic. Thematically, it's the glue that holds the Citadel together and is possibly the single zone most frequently revisited as you Metroidvania around the world. It's worth noting that it doesn't have a ton of gauntlets, and while there's a ton of platforming, it's usually not that particularly difficult. It's just how you move around. And don't get me wrong, moving through it's fun, but it definitely gets hurt a little bit by most of the best bits of the Citadel just being slightly outside the Coral Chambers and being in a different part of the Citadel. It ends up feeling like the Coral Chambers is the bread to the Citadel sandwich. Like if we were including bosses in this tier list, Cogwork Dancers and Lace 2 are a combined 3 screens away from Coral Chambers, and the whole zone is kinda like that the more I look at it. That said, the whole zone is still stunningly beautiful, super fun to move through, and consistently difficult enough to keep me very engaged. It's a great zone, and I couldn't take it out of my S tier if I wanted to. But it doesn't quite make it to my top zone. No, my favorite zone in the game has to go to the Cogwork Core. It is my favorite zone soundtrack in the game, and all the hardest, most interesting platforming segments live here. I guess, technically speaking, that's not true. If you're doing optional post-game stuff with the Mushroom Man, then you can go to the surface and find a harder one, but it's certainly not a more fun one. Getting back on track with the Cogwork Core though, my favorite part of it is that these platforming segments are non-linear with multiple solutions depending on what movement abilities you have available to you. The worst part of Act 3 for me, by far, is that it killed Cogwork Core. Well, it delayed the soundtrack starting in the lowered section and killed the upper section, but still. While the gauntlets here aren't spectacular, the enemy design absolutely kills it, with almost every enemy being designed as an extension to the platforming. A lot of them are obvious, like the flying and climbing spike enemies, but even the little cartoon steam dudes that blast steam out of their ears are essentially a platforming challenge asking you to pogo their heads. The dudes with knife hands that charge you are always strategically positioned to make dodging them a difficult movement trick. It's all platforming all the time, but it's brilliantly well-made platforming. I won't call it this game's Path to Pain, but I'll definitely call it this game's White Palace. It is genuinely just fantastic platforming beginning to end. The enemy design elevates that. It has a wonderful soundtrack that meshes with and directly elevates the awesome visual design of the area. I mean, very genuinely, this is my favorite zone in the game, and it's not particularly close. There might be other things in S tier, but there's nothing coming close to the Cogwork Core for me. And as I wrap this up, I figured I should remind you all that if you want to see more content like this from me, you should sub to the channel. If you could leave a comment or a like, it's all hugely appreciated, as it really does help the channel get more traction. It's what tells YouTube to show the video to more people. I've been shocked by just how much support these videos have seen, and I cannot overstate my gratitude for all of you. And as a brief update for where this channel will be going in the near future, I previously mentioned that I would upload my whole first playthrough on this channel, heavily edited down, and well, you can't do that anymore. It turns out YouTube has added a 12-hour time limit for new uploads. Not that anyone particularly cared, but there will be a link in the description to the playlist on my other channel of my daily uploads, where it was still pretty heavily edited down, but nowhere close to, like, it was 35 hours. We're not going to get that down to 12. I will definitely edit down and upload my Silksong run once I finish that. I'll be starting after this video, and I'll definitely revisit my boss tier list and crest tier list after that run with some more experience and all the feedback given about those subjects. Also, with any changes made, because I'm sad to say that apparently a patch just dropped, massively nerfing the Flint State Architect Crest interaction on the charge attack, but I'm still looking forward to playing a lot more Silksong in the near future and seeing what else the game has in store for me. If there's anything specific you want to hear about, let me know in the comments. It's where the idea for this video came from in the first place. Anyways, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful night.